Hello, today I'm going to talk to you guys about the disease of ALS. ALS is also known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This means that there's no muscle nourishment to any muscles in the body because the signals from the spinal cord cannot reach the required body systems. This is a progressive disease, which means it goes very slowly. It does not happen all at once. A person can have this disease from 1 year up to a max of 10 years, depending on what treatments they take to prevent the disease from spreading. It all depends on the person. This disease is very one-on-one to the case and the person that receives it. There's two types of ALS. There's sporadic, which is about 90% of cases is sporadic, which means they have no idea why. It's usually not linked with genetics. It's usually just random. But then 10% of the cases is FALS or familial ALS, and this deals with the genetic side and that it can also actually be passed down from generation to generation. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So FALS or familial ALS is often feels the symptoms before someone with sporadic ALS. This could be just because it's been in their body from the beginning of birth, or because other family members have had it, so they just kind of like trick themselves into thinking it. There's a lot of studies that say that sometimes people in the family that has ALS thinks they have it, and then that triggers certain chemical reactions, and it's actually like a big phenomenon, and they're doing research to see like why this happens. So the likelihood is the same in males and females. Just because you're a female or male doesn't mean like you're any less like susceptible to it. It really targets anyone. It doesn't depend on the gender. So when you have the mutation gene of SOD1, this means that the person has a copy of that gene mutation and one that doesn't. So people that are dormant with it could still have it, if that makes sense. Genetic testing is the number one way to figure out if you have it, and that's through taking blood or spit samples. And all tests are ordered by a professional because they're very, very expensive. So if you don't need to take it, they don't want you to take it. So the way that this works is that two proteins bind together in a normal person's body, and it creates a chain, and this chain allows the neuron signals to get through and work to the muscles. But in FALS, the mutation gene SOD1 ruins the bond and kind of like closes like the gap that these two proteins have created, so nothing can get through, and the muscles just kind of start to deteriorate because there's nothing like working them. So they just kind of start to they get very malnourished and then end up like dying. So the initial symptoms are like dropping a glass, or like not being able to pick up a cup, or like slurring of speech, or like a stutter. And obviously these are like, they're not common things, but like they're not things that you would think like, oh, like I should go to the doctor for this. So many people just ignore the first symptoms until like it starts getting like worse and starts affecting like a whole limb, and then they are usually brought to a neurologist. So the demographic of this disease, up to 300,000 people have the disease in any given time in the United States, and that's with the mutation being in their body being dormant. But the actual amount of people with sporadic or FALS that are in the United States is about 20,000 cases per year. So it's a pretty rare disease, but there still is quite a lot of people just in the U.S. having the disease, and this disease has no racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic boundaries. It really doesn't matter where you come from. It really just depends on if you have the mutation or not. So the diagnosis, there's a couple ways that you can do it. There's an EMG, that's a recording technique that detects electrical activity in muscle fibers. And then there's like lab work that you can do to rule out like all other forms of like diseases. So the body systems that are truly affected is obviously the nervous system and the muscular system, and then from there like the organs are affected because not only are the muscles not working, but now the nervous system isn't working, so everything else just begins to shut down. So the most symptoms are muscle weakness, and obviously like the speech that I said earlier. Things that aren't affected at all are the eyes, the nose, and the ears, and then you can touch, like you can still feel touch, and then you can still taste. So scientists don't really know why those aren't affected, just because like they're part of they don't know that yet, but I don't know. Okay, so symptoms. So what I was saying earlier with like the body systems is that like once one goes, the next kind of goes, because it's kind of like in a pattern. So like, yeah. Other things that I want to talk about is the treatment. So you usually do like, there's a lot of medicines to like slow the progression, but any treatment really doesn't like stop ALS, it just like prolongs you. So like, yeah, does anyone have any questions?
What's the, like, how old are they when they get diagnosed usually?
Usually people are between like 40 and 60. There's some cases with younger, but usually it hits people in like when they're middle-aged.
So were you and your sister treated? I mean, like tested for it?
Yeah, we were, but that was just like a special case. We weren't tested like fully, we were just tested like, it was weird. Like we weren't tested like the way most people get tested, so like we kind of did, but we kind of didn't.
Okay.
Is there any ways to catch the disease early on in life?
If you have FALS, it is just because you can go through pedigrees and like looking at like your family history. But if you have sporadic, there's none. It just like happens randomly.
Was your dad sporadic, or was there other family members with
My
it?
dad was a sporadic case of ALS.
So, can you have like the mutation and then not get ALS?
Yeah, so the gene or the mutation of SOD1 can be dormant in you the entire time. Most people with FALS have like the gene, but they have like they have the gene, but it just is dormant the whole time. But with that, it always can start up, like, so it's very like risky. So, yeah.
Because I know that Stephen Hawking's had ALS. How did he survive for so long if most people don't?
He survived on machines, so like you can survive for very long periods of time if you're up to like a ventilator and like people like do everything for you. But I mean that's really no way to live. So most people don't do that, and it's also very, very expensive. And Stephen Hawking like had the money to like do that, where most people don't.
With a regular case, how long do they live for usually?
Up to 5 years they usually last.
Does it progress quickly?
No, the progression is pretty slow. In women, it's much more faster just because there's just like less usually than like a guy. Like guys usually have more muscle mass, so for girls it usually lasts up to 3 years, where guys it's like 5.
Do you know the difference between MS and ALS?
I really don't that much. I know MS is like, it kind of deals with the same thing, but it's like less, like people can live with MS or not ALS.
Did this really affect your family?
Yeah, ALS affected my family a lot, but I mean, yeah, it did, but what are you gonna do?
What do you think what was your most interesting point that you found while doing like research about this?
I thought the treatments were pretty cool. The drugs that slow down the disease, there's like 2 like big ones, and one reduces like the daily functioning associated with ALS, so like it helps like picking stuff up and like talking, and I thought that was like a super cool thing like to like put out there. I thought the treatments were super cool.
So is there like I mean there probably is, but is there a large difference in people who like receive the treatments versus if they just let it go?
Yeah, with the treatments, they can like live up to like 2 more years just because the drugs like slow down how fast the disease affects you.
Is there like personality changes with the person who has it?
I mean, that's all up to the person. Like, I mean, the disease doesn't like affect like your brain and like how it's like programmed, but like it really just depends on if like the person lets the disease get to them or not.
Your dad lived a lot longer than his like expected time. Was that because of the treatment, or was it just like a miracle case?
I don't know. I actually don't know if my dad took like any of these drugs. I don't think he did, so I just think it was just luck of the draw.
So you aren't familiar with the type of drugs then, since you said your dad didn't?
Yeah, I just found those in my research, and that's like the like coolest thing I found in my research. I like was never like, I never knew that there was like drugs. I only thought there was like therapy and like coping mechanisms. Like the therapy is like, it helps you like move your muscles and like make sure those don't get like tense up and stuff like that. Because just because the muscles are dying doesn't mean like you don't have feeling in them. So like the therapy and like the speech therapy just kind of like makes it all Just better. Okay, thank you.